The morning rush had already begun. The streets of downtown were alive with honking cars, hurried footsteps, and the smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee drifting from corner cafes. Amid the towering skyscrapers that gleamed under the rising sun, a little food truck stood parked on the corner of 9th Street. It was nothing fancy, just a silver van with peeling paint and a chalkboard menu propped against its side. But to many regulars, it was a small haven of warmth, laughter, and affordable food in the heart of a city that often felt too cold and too fast. Inside that truck was Elena, a young woman barely in her 20s. Her hands moved swiftly, wrapping breakfast burritos, pouring steaming cups of coffee, and greeting each customer with a tired but genuine smile. Life hadn't been kind to her. Her mother had passed away when she was just 16, and her father had left long before that. With no family to rely on, Elena had learned early on that survival meant hard work, sacrifice, and swallowing the sting of loneliness every night. Running the food truck wasn't easy. She often woke at 4 a.m. to prep, and some nights she stayed until midnight, scrubbing pans until her hands ached. But she refused to give up. The truck wasn't just a business, it was her mother's dream. Feed people with love, her mother used to say, and no one will ever truly forget you. So even when exhaustion pulled at her bones, Elena cooked with her heart. That morning, the line outside the truck was unusually long. Office workers tapped their feet impatiently, college students scrolled through their phones, and the hum of chatter filled the air. Elena peeked out from the little window and sighed. It was going to be a busy day. Somewhere in the middle of that line stood a man who didn't quite fit in. He wore a tailored navy suit, polished leather shoes, and a silver watch that gleamed under the sun. His posture was upright, his expression calm, almost too calm for the bustling crowd around him. The others barely noticed him, but if anyone had looked closely, they might have recognized him. Adrian Cole. A name whispered in boardrooms and printed on magazine covers. A millionaire, the CEO of one of the city's fastest-growing tech companies. People usually rushed to shake his hand, to grab a photo, to brag that they had seen him in person. But here he was, standing quietly in line at a humble food truck, completely ignored. Except Adrian didn't mind. In fact, he wanted it that way. When his turn finally came, Elena barely glanced at him. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, strands falling loosely against her flushed cheeks. She was focused on the grill, flipping eggs with practiced ease. "What'll it be?" she asked, her tone brisk but not unkind. "A black coffee," Adrian replied smoothly, his voice calm but carrying a strange weight. For a second, something flickered in Elena's chest. His voice, low, steady, felt oddly familiar, like a faint melody from a song she couldn't quite place. But she shook off the thought. Customers came and went. Familiarity was just an illusion when you met hundreds of faces a day. "That'll be $3.50, she said, handing him the steaming cup. Adrian took it, but instead of walking away, he leaned just slightly closer. His eyes, sharp yet softened by something unspoken, held hers. And then he whispered, almost like a secret, "Still remember me?" Elena froze. Her hand, still holding change, trembled. Her breath caught in her throat. Those words. That voice. That gaze. She blinked, trying to steady herself, but memories crashed into her like waves. Years ago. A rain-soaked night. A boy with bruised knuckles sitting alone under a broken street lamp. She had been 16 then, carrying leftover sandwiches from the diner, where she worked part-time. She noticed him sitting there, shivering, clearly too proud to beg but too hungry to move. She had walked up, placed the food beside him, and said softly, "Eat. You don't have to thank me." The boy had looked up at her with the same sharp eyes. They were tired, almost hollow, but behind them burned a fierce determination. He hadn't said much, but as he bit into the sandwich, she remembered him whispering, "I'll pay this back someday." Alina's lips parted, but no words came out. Her chest tightened. Could it really be him? The boy from all those years ago, the stranger she had fed without expecting anything in return. But before she could speak, the line behind him grew restless. Someone muttered, "Hurry up." Adrian gave her one last lingering look, then walked away, leaving her clutching the counter, her mind spinning. The rest of the day blurred. She cooked, served, smiled, and laughed when needed, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him. Was it possible? Could a homeless boy she once helped now stand before her as a millionaire CEO? That night, as she closed the truck, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw him step out, his suit jacket now off, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked less like the untouchable CEO and more like him. The boy she had once pitied and admired all at once. "Elena," he said softly, as though testing the weight of her name after so many years. She didn't know what to say. You were that boy." Adrian nodded. "I was. And I never forgot you." The city noise faded around them. The neon lights, the rumble of cars, the chatter of late-night passers-by, it all became a distant hum. All Elena could hear was the pounding of her own heart. "Why are you here?" she whispered. Adrian smiled faintly, though his eyes glistened with something raw. "Because I promised myself that if I ever made it out of that life, if I ever built something worth sharing, I'd come back for the only person who ever saw me when I was invisible." Tears welled in Alina's eyes. For so long, she had carried her mother's words like a burden, wondering if feeding people with love really mattered in a world that often gave nothing back. But here he was, living proof that it had mattered. That one small act of kindness had rippled across years, shaping a man who now stood tall, powerful, but still human enough to remember. And in that moment, she realized, sometimes the greatest investments are not made with money, but with compassion. Alina's hands trembled as she leaned against the side of her food truck. The cool metal pressed into her back, grounding her in a moment that felt almost unreal. The boy she once fed had returned, not as the lost, starving teenager she remembered, but as a man who carried the weight of success and scars of the past in equal measure. Adrian stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I used to sit there every night," he said, pointing faintly toward the corner of the street where a broken lamp still flickered weakly. "Cold, hungry, trying to believe I was tougher than I really was. Everyone walked past me like I didn't exist. And then one night, you stopped." Elena swallowed hard, memories flooding back. She remembered how fragile he'd looked, rain dripping from his hair, his lips pale with hunger. She had wanted to say more to him that night, to ask who he was, why he was there, but his silence had told her not to pry. She had only given him food and walked away. "I never thought you'd remember me," she whispered. "How could I forget?" Adrian's voice cracked, betraying the emotions buried beneath his calm exterior. "That sandwich, it wasn't just food. It was the first time in years someone had treated me like a human being. You didn't ask me what I did wrong, You didn't pity me, you just gave. Elena felt her throat tighten. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck. All she could do was nod, her eyes shimmering. Adrian glanced at the food truck, its worn paint, the flickering light bulb above the window. Is this yours? Yes, she said softly. It was my mother's dream. She passed before she could see it open. I've been running it ever since. Something shifted in his gaze, admiration, maybe even pride. You've been carrying her dream on your shoulders all this time. Elena shrugged lightly, trying to mask the ache in her chest. Some days I don't even know how I keep going. But I promised her I'd try. Silence lingered between them. The city's heartbeat pulsed around them, cars rushing by, laughter spilling from a nearby bar. But in that moment, they were two people connected by a fragile thread of memory and gratitude. Finally, Adrian exhaled. Come with me. Just for tonight. I want to talk. Somewhere quieter. Elena hesitated. She didn't know if she should trust him, didn't know if stepping into his world would only remind her how far apart their lives had grown. But something in his eyes, earnest, vulnerable, made her nod. The drive. Minutes later, she sat in the back of his sleek car, her calloused hands folded nervously on her lap. The leather seats felt too soft, too clean compared to the greasy counters and metal stools she was used to. Adrian sat beside her, loosening his tie, no longer the picture-perfect CEO in a magazine spread but simply a man who carried his past wherever he went. They drove out of the downtown chaos into quieter streets lined with trees and golden lamplight. Finally, they stopped at a small diner, nothing fancy, just a cozy place with neon signs buzzing faintly in the window. Of all places, why here? Elena asked as they stepped out. Adrian smiled faintly. Because this was the first place that ever hired me. I washed dishes in the back. It kept me alive. They slid into a booth, and for a moment, Adrian was silent, studying her. You haven't changed much, he said softly. Elena raised a brow. You mean I still look like the girl who handed you food in the rain? He chuckled, shaking his head. No, I mean you still have that same fire in your eyes. The one that says you'll fight the whole world if you have to. Her cheeks flushed, though she quickly looked away. Maybe. But fire doesn't pay the bills. Adrian leaned forward, his voice steady. Tell me, Elena, what's the hardest part? She blinked, taken aback. The hardest part? Yes. Of running the truck. Of your life right now. I want to know. No one had ever asked her that before. Not really. Customers made small talk, friends asked if she was tired, but no one had dug deeper. She hesitated, then whispered, the hardest part is pretending I'm okay. Pretending I don't feel like I'm drowning every day. The truck barely makes enough to cover expenses. The rent keeps rising. I eat whatever scraps are left at the end of the day. And some nights, her voice cracked. Some nights I wonder if all of this is worth it. Adrian's chest tightened. He remembered those nights himself, lying awake with hunger gnawing at him, questioning if tomorrow was worth facing. Elena, he said quietly, don't ever think what you do doesn't matter. You fed me when you had nothing. And that small act of kindness changed everything. Her eyes glistened, but she forced a smile. You keep saying that, but look at you now. You would have made it anyway. Adrian shook his head firmly. No, you don't understand. That night, I was ready to give up. And then you showed me someone still cared. It gave me just enough strength to keep going. Alina's lips trembled. She looked down at her hands, trying to hold back tears. Flashbacks. As they sat there, Adrian began sharing his story, the parts the world didn't know, the chapters left out of glossy interviews and success articles. He spoke of growing up in a broken home, his mother working 3 jobs before she disappeared from his life, his father drowning in alcohol and debts. He ran away at 15, choosing the streets over fists and shouted curses. Nights were long and cold, food scarce, and every day was a battle to stay invisible enough to survive. But through it all, he remembered that one night, her kindness, her smile. It became an anchor in his storm, a reminder that not everyone in the world had turned their back on him. I worked like a madman after that, Adrian admitted. I washed dishes, swept floors, hauled crates at the docks. I saved every penny, studied at the library, taught myself coding on an old laptop someone threw away. And whenever I felt like quitting, I thought of you. The girl who reminded me I was worth feeding. Alina's tears finally spilled. She covered her face, overwhelmed. I never knew, she whispered. I just thought I was helping someone get through the night. You did more than that, Adrian said, reaching across the table. You helped me believe in tomorrow. This is where the story deepens. We'll explore Alina's struggles more, her battles with debt, her mother's memory, her loneliness. Adrian will show her his world, lavish offices, a life of luxury, but also the emptiness of success without connection. Conflicts will arise. Alina's pride, her refusal to accept charity, her fear of losing her independence. A major twist. Alina's food truck is threatened with closure, and Adrian must decide whether to step in, and Alina must choose whether to accept. The night at the diner lingered in Alina's mind long after she returned home. She lay on her narrow mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling of her small apartment above the food truck garage. Adrian's words echoed, "You helped me believe in tomorrow." But reality was cruel. Tomorrow meant another 4 a.m. alarm, another long day of cooking and serving, another stack of unpaid bills waiting by the door. By the 3rd day after their reunion, Alina tried to convince herself it had just been a fleeting encounter. A coincidence. Their worlds were too far apart. He, a millionaire CEO, and she, a struggling food truck girl. And yet, every morning, she found herself glancing at the crowd outside her truck, half hoping to see him again. And he came. Adrian began showing up almost daily. Sometimes in suits, sometimes more casual, always standing quietly in line like everyone else. But when it was his turn, his gaze always lingered on her, steady and warm. He didn't order fancy. Just coffee. Black, no sugar. Always with the same small smile. At first, Alina ignored the whispers from customers who recognized him. Is that Adrian Cole, the tech guy? She brushed it off. But the unease grew. She didn't want attention. She didn't want pity. Finally, one morning, she confronted him. You don't have to keep coming here, she muttered as she handed him his coffee. Adrian raised a brow. Don't want my business. It's not that, she said, biting her lip. It's just, people talk. They look at me differently because of you. Adrian's smile softened. Let them talk. I'm not here for them. I'm here for you. Her heart stuttered, but her pride flared. I don't need saving, Adrian. I've managed this long without anyone. I know, he replied gently. That's what I admire most. But sometimes, even the strongest people deserve help. Dash dash dash. A crumbling dream. Weeks passed, and the bond between them deepened. They spoke about their pasts, their fears, their dreams. Adrian, despite his wealth, confessed he often felt alone, surrounded by people who wanted something from him, but never really saw him. With Elena, he could simply be Adrian, not Mr. Cole. But for Elena, the struggles only grew heavier. The landlord raised the parking rent for her food truck space. Supplies became more expensive. Her old delivery van broke down completely. She tried to mask her stress with forced smiles, but Adrian saw the cracks. One rainy evening, Elena sat alone inside the truck, head buried in her arms. Business had been slow that week, and she barely made enough to cover costs. The rain tapped against the roof, a cruel reminder of the storm inside her. When the door opened, she looked up, and there he was, soaked from the downpour, holding 2 takeout bags. "I thought maybe you'd skip dinner," Adrian said softly, setting the bags on the counter. "So I brought something." Her throat tightened. "I can't keep letting you do this." He sat across from her, ignoring her protest. "Elena, listen to me. You don't have to carry all of this alone." Tears burned her eyes. "And what? Let you swoop in with your money and fix everything? Do you know what that would make me feel like? That I couldn't stand on my own 2 feet. That I was weak." Adrian leaned forward, his voice raw. "You think taking help makes you weak? Elena, I wouldn't be alive if someone hadn't helped me. That sandwich, your kindness, that was help. Did it make me weak to accept it?" She froze. His words struck her like lightning. She had never thought of it that way. But still, she shook her head. "This truck, it's all I have left of her. If I can't keep it running on my own, then what was the point?" Adrian's heart ached. He wanted to tell her he'd buy her a fleet of trucks, that he'd make sure she never had to work another day if she didn't want to. But he knew she would refuse. So instead, he whispered, "Then let me help you stand, not carry you. Just let me stand with you." Dash dash dash. Flashback. Her mother's words. That night, Elena dreamed of her mother again. She saw her in the small kitchen of their old apartment, flour dusting her apron, hands kneading dough with care. Her mother's voice was gentle, soothing. "Food isn't just about feeding the stomach, Lena. It's about feeding the soul. One day, you'll understand." In the dream, Elena whispered, "But Mama, what if I can't keep your dream alive?" Her mother only smiled, brushing flour from Elena's cheek. "Dreams aren't meant to crush you, sweetheart. They're meant to guide you. And sometimes, they grow bigger than we ever imagined, because of the people we meet along the way." Elena woke with tears streaming down her face. Dash dash dash. The threat. The next week, the real storm hit. A corporate chain of food trucks moved into the area, shiny and heavily advertised. They parked just 2 blocks away, selling gourmet meals at cutthroat prices. Customers flocked to them, dazzled by the branding and promotions. Elena's little truck was forgotten almost overnight. Day after day, she watched her line shrink. Some days she barely sold enough to keep the lights on. The pressure built like a weight crushing her chest. Adrian noticed immediately. He stopped by one evening to find her cleaning empty counters, her eyes hollow. "They're going to crush me," she admitted in a whisper. "I can't compete with them. I'll lose the truck. I'll lose everything." Adrian's jaw tightened. "No, you're not going to lose this. Not if I can help it." Her pride flared again. "Adrian, please, don't. If this dream dies, it's because I wasn't strong enough. That's on me. But Adrian's eyes burned with determination. No, Elena. Sometimes the world isn't fair. Sometimes strength isn't enough. But I made a promise, to myself, and to you, that if I ever had the power, I'd give back the way you gave to me. Let me keep that promise. Elena stared at him, torn between pride and desperation, between fear of losing everything and fear of losing herself. This is the perfect setup for the climactic turn. Adrian may secretly invest in her business without her knowing it first. Elena could discover it and feel betrayed. A major confrontation will happen, testing their bond. And finally, we'll bring them to an emotional resolution where Elena learns that accepting love and help doesn't diminish her strength, it honors her mother's dream.